A while back, I did a video comparing a couple of lenses for focus breathing. And I wanted to follow it up and do one more, adding two more lenses to the mix. What I did was I got this one, the 16 to 50 Fujifilm kit lens, and I got it at B&H, and they currently have it $200 off the list price. So it's $4.99 US instead of $6.99 US, which honestly, the $6.99 US would be, I wouldn't spend that money for this lens, but at $4.99, yeah. And honestly, I probably would have been better off buying it with the kit when I bought the XS20, but I thought I was happy keeping the 18 to 55 millimeter. And in my focus breathing test that I did earlier this year, the 18 to 55 was the winner. It had the least focus breathing at about arm's length distance from the camera. Right now we're shooting on the 13 millimeter f1.4 Viltrox lens, and I have it stopped down to 2.8. And I'm doing that for a reason, because I'm going to compare it to the 18 to 55 at 2.8 and the 16 to 50 at 2.8, and just see which one does better with the focus breathing. The new lens is lighter. It doesn't have OIS, it doesn't have image stabilization, but both of my cameras do have IBIS, so that's not as big of a concern for me. What I did like about this lens is the 16 millimeter, because that means I could eliminate the 16 millimeter f2.8 little lens that I've got. I don't need that then if I've got the 16 to 50 to take with me when I'm traveling. The internal zoom on this 16 to 50 is really nice. It keeps this thing nice and compact. Really do like that. I went on a trip earlier this year and I took the 16 millimeter f2.8 lens and my 35 millimeter 1.4 lens. And it was great, except for it would have been really nice to have the zoom, especially going to the places that I went to. There was a lot of architecture to photograph, so that meant keeping the 16 millimeter on there. But then I wanted to do some shots that really required the 35. And I think I would have been happier just carrying around the 16 to 50 for the day versus the 18 to 55, because that 16 just gives me that little bit of extra width, especially when you're outdoors and shooting. Having that 16 millimeter lens was great, except for when I wanted to get some more close-up shots, and the 35 was better. And changing the lens back and forth on the camera was really annoying for that kind of a trip. I was with friends and didn't really have a lot of time to work my photographs, so I just pretty much had to move along with everybody, change my lenses as quickly as I could. In hindsight, the 16 millimeter would have been a better option, because I could have covered from 16 all the way to 50, and that would have been great for that trip. I picked this up, but given that I've already agreed that I'm not buying any more Fujifilm lenses, or at least I'm not adding to my collection, that means I've got to sell something. So it'll probably be the 18 to 55 that I'll sell, and I might end up selling the 16 millimeter f2.8 lens as well, because I have one more lens coming, but that'll be a surprise, and I'll save that for when and if it actually gets here. All right, so we're on the 13 millimeter at f2.8, right? So I'm just going to hold up, and I have this set for multi as far as the autofocus mode. We're not on area right now. We're just on multi. I'm going to hold this up, and I'll put my tracking speed and my autofocus speed up on the screen so you can see. This will give you an idea of how well this lens performs. And if you notice this light back here, that's a good thing to watch. That and the photograph up there of Henry, that's a good way to gauge how well or not well the focus breathing is doing. So this is the 13 millimeter. Okay, let's switch the lens to the 18 to 55. Okay, now we're on the 18 to 55. We are at f2.8 and we're at 18 millimeters. We'll take a look at this one. So this lens actually did the best in my last test that I did with the other lenses that I compared. And I'll put a link for that video in the description if you want to check it out. But this will give you a good idea of how well the focusing is on this. Now I'm on the XS20 and I'm on the latest firmware, which is 3.0 as of right now. So that's the firmware that technically has some issues. So one thing that I did notice on both the 18-55 and the 16-50 is when I've got it zoomed out all the way to 50 or 55, there's problems focusing when you are going from up close back and up close again. Okay, so this is at 18. Let me just zoom this in. Okay, so now we are at 55. Okay, so it's focused on the lens. Watch now. It's pretty slow to come into focus. I've had some where it's never done. See, right now it's still not focusing. Not at all. Finally did grab it just there at the last second. So there's some odd behavior, and it's not the new lens. It's not the 16-50, which is where I initially saw this. It's more like right now it's having trouble grabbing onto the lens, even though it's filling up the whole frame here. See? It's just not working great. So if we scoot this back, so that's just one thing to be aware of with the, when you're at the long end here on these. On the current firmware for the XS20, I don't know if it would be an issue on the XT5 because I've downgraded the firmware on the XT5 to 2.10, so I'm just happier with it there. But this one I just left at the current version. It works much better when you're zoomed in. Or zoomed out. Okay, now we're going to switch. We're going to put the 16-50 on here and you can see what that looks like. Okay, so now we are on the 16-50 at f2.8 and we are at 16 millimeters. And we'll give this a test. Pay attention to the lights in the back. You can get a better idea of what the focus breathing is like. One thing I really like about that 16-50 lens is the internal zoom. This one here extends, right? That one just zooms internally, which is really nice. It keeps it nice and small and compact, which is exactly what I would want for traveling around. Okay, we're on the 16-50 and we're at f2.8, but we've switched the focus mode to area. So we've got a box in the middle, and that is where the focus is going to be. So if I want to put the lens up and focus it, I've got to get it in that box. Okay. Take it away, it should focus back on me. There it goes again. Focus back on me. One more time. One thing I wanted to point out is, and I pointed this out on another video I did about getting the focusing for studio to work on the XS20. One of the things to remember is if you talk with your hands like I do, then multi is probably not what you want, because as you can see in the other clips that I showed you of the 3 lenses for the focus breathing test, once I put the lens down and I start talking, it starts grabbing focus on your hands and your face blurs out a little bit. You kind of get that shifting back and forth. If you use the area, this is easier because as long as I don't put my hand in the box, right? So as soon as I do, there you go, I'm out of focus and now I'm back in. So This makes it a little easier. You just have to remember that if you want to show something, doesn't matter what it is, that you got to kind of just get it in that box, right? Just like that. So I would say most all the time, use area when I'm in the studio here. I find that that just works the best. I don't use the face eye auto detect because it doesn't work very well, especially here in the studio. If you want to showcase other things, then you're trying to like cover your face and hide your face to try to show something. And even though the XS20 has that product mode, you know, where you can showcase products, I thought the focus breathing was kind of weird on that too. So haven't checked that out in a while, so don't know if a firmware has fixed that, but given how the firmware has been going, I wouldn't be betting on that happening. So let's just stick with the area, right? So anyway, that was the 16 to 50. Let's look at the 18 to 55. Okay, so we are on the 18 to 55 at f2.8, and we're using area for a focus mode. There you go. That's the 18 to 55. Okay, now we're on the 13 millimeter with area focus mode at f2.8. We're at 13 millimeter. One thing I noticed on this 13 millimeter, there's just a little bit of flickering when it gets back into focus. All right, so after looking at all of these clips, I think that the 16 to 50 is probably the best one for in here in the studio. I'm getting that little bit of extra width. I think it's, the 13 is a bit wide for this space. The 13 millimeter, I've got to bring the camera just a little bit closer. You get a little bit more distortion with that. So I think that for this room and for how I've got this set up, the 16 to 50 works well. I can keep it at 16 at f2.8. I've got plenty of lighting options to keep the exposure where I want. I hope this video was helpful for you. I'm going to keep the 16 to 50 lens. I really like it. I'm going to be selling the 18 to 55 and 16 f2.8 lens as well. See you in the next one. Take care.